everyone, it's Kathy, and today I am going to be talking about Special Topics in Calamity Physics by Marisha Pessl. This book was recommended to me by a college professor that I had about, 7 years ago. So it's been on my to-reads pile for quite a while. I don't know why it took me so long to get to it, but it was the first book that I read this year, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. Special Topics in Calamity Physics centers around a girl named Blue and her unconventional upbringing with her father. When she was 5 years old, her mother died in a car crash, and ever since then her father has been unable to lay down any roots in any one particular town or city. So as a result, Blue has spent her entire childhood and adolescence moving from town to town and city to city. I don't think she ever spent more than a few months in one school. So one day when Blue is about to start her senior year of high school, her father informs her that for the first time they are going to be staying in one neighborhood for the duration of her senior year, and so Blue will be able to stay in one school for a whole year. The day before she starts this new school, she runs into a woman named Hannah Schneider, who ends up being one of the teachers at the school that Blue is going to attend. Hannah is immediately drawn to Blue, is almost strangely determined to make sure that Blue feels welcome in the new school and has friends. The school year begins and Blue quickly learns that there is a group, your typical high school elite exclusive group on the campus. Blue learns also that this group and Hannah, the teacher that she just met, have this sort of strange friendship going on, and they meet once a week, and Blue doesn't really know what it's about. But Hannah is completely determined to welcome Blue into this group without, might I add, the say of any of its original members. Hannah is just resolved to have Blue be included in this group and to get close to Blue. So for a while the book goes on exploring the dynamics of this group in light of its new member, and you can imagine how that goes down. So the way that the book has been progressing so far, it's definitely a kind of quiet, it's about an elite school. The pace is pretty slow, and I was really enjoying reading about all of Blue's thoughts. She's a really smart and witty girl, so it's fun to read things from her perspective. But then there's a mysterious drowning. Hannah's friend drowns, and that sort of shifts the mood of the book a little bit, and then Hannah herself dies in a very mysterious and tragic way. And this is not a spoiler. This is, unless you don't read the back of the book, but it says on the back of the book that she dies. So once Hannah dies, the book really turns into another kind of story. It becomes a thriller, a whodunit. So that's pretty much the plot of the book. I have to say that for probably the first half of the book, I just found it impossible to put it down. I wrote on my friends' Facebook pages, at least 3 people's pages, saying, "Oh my god, Special Topics in Calamity Physics by Marisha Pessl, you have to buy and read this book right now." A lot of the criticism that this book has gotten has been that it's pretentious, and I definitely see where these people who say that are coming from. This book is really chock full of references, of literary references, science references, religious references, what have you. It's just full of them. Think sort of along the lines of the show Gilmore Girls. You know how each season had to publish its own separate pamphlet for all the references that were mentioned in that season? It's kind of like that. It's also full of metaphors and similes, and it's just a really, really, really smart and witty book. This really reminded me about the criticism that I remember reading about one of my favorite books, The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Bradbury. I really, again, saw where those people were coming from, but I didn't agree because I felt like the pretentiousness expressed in the novel was very necessary for the telling of that story. So I was really willing to let it slide. Um, and I usually am if I feel that the book sort of needs to be overly intelligent to tell that specific story. And if it serves the story, then I'm not going to really care if it's so-called pretentious. So that's how I was feeling probably for the first half of the book when I couldn't put it down. After Hannah dies, the frequency of the references and the metaphors and the similes stayed the same. And that's when my opinion started to change a little bit, because it's one thing to have a book written that way when you're talking about Blue and her father growing up with really only each other for company, and both of them are intellectuals, so of course you're gonna have all these discussions and references, and also the first part of the book really talks about Blue's experiences at the different schools, and her perspective is going to be that of a really smart girl. But then Hannah dies and it becomes more of a thriller, and so I just started feeling like all the references were kind of overkill, and like there were times when they're talking to the cops, and all of a sudden Blue sort of thinks up like 4 different references, and I was just like, okay, but like that's not, we need to really find out what's going on right now. Like the time for all these references has passed, and it started kind of annoying me a little bit. Not that much. I was at that point invested enough in the story where I still cared what happened and how it all resolved itself, so I was able to let it slide, but it just felt to me that in the last third of the book, at least 30% of those references could have been edited out without sacrificing the story in any kind of way, which I didn't feel in the beginning. In the beginning, almost every reference that I read, I felt, oh wow, there was probably no other way to describe the moment without talking about, I don't know, Frida Kahlo or Tennessee Williams. Even the references that went over my head, I still appreciated their presence. But I did not feel that way at the end of the book. I kind of, I don't want to say that I slogged through the ending, but I definitely did not enjoy it as much as I did the beginning. I remember probably during the first 100 pages thinking, this is totally a book that I'm going to reread. But by the time I ended it, I was very happy to have read it, but I wasn't necessarily thinking that it was a book that I was going to ever reread. And it also kind of made me, it gave me the impression of a debut writer who's trying very hard to impress her reader, which is not a thought that I usually have. But yeah, so once I started thinking like that, I felt a little bit removed from the story, and I no longer felt lost in it. I could see the writer being very clever, and so that was a little bit disappointing. So yeah, I would still recommend it. I thought it was a very interesting and sharp read. If you've read it, I would love to know your thoughts. And if you've read her other book that just came out, I think she has a total of 2, but I'm not sure. Night Film, I think it's called. If you've read that and have any thoughts on how it compares in any way, I would love to hear about it. And also any thoughts that you might have on the topic of pretentiousness. What is pretentiousness? How much pretentiousness or so-called pretentiousness is too much? When does it serve the story and when does it not serve the story? These are all things that I'm very grateful to now be thinking about. So I'm very happy to have read this book because now all these thoughts are swimming in my head. I wasn't really thinking about this kind of thing after I read Elegance of the Hedgehog because I loved it from the beginning to end, so I found it very easy to dismiss any accusations of pretentiousness. But with this one, because I had a different experience in the beginning versus the end, now I'm really thinking about it. So I would appreciate any thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.